There are people in every company who remain invisible until the entire system collapses beyond repair. I was fired at 9:03 a.m. By 9:17, they were frantically begging me to come back. Unfortunately for them, I'd already seen through their power games. And I was ready to prove who really controlled this whole machine. They thought I was just another replaceable cog. They were about to learn that some cogs hold the entire engine together. My name is Madison Clark, and for 11 years, I was the invisible architect holding SynCore Analytics together. 39 years old, no kids, no distractions. Just me and the intricate web of systems I'd built from scratch. The kind of employee they never noticed at company parties but couldn't survive a day without. That Monday morning started like any other. Coffee at 7:30, inbox review at 7:45, checking overnight system logs by 8 course. Everything running smoothly, as always. Then the meeting invite popped up on my screen at 8:47 a.m. Alignment meeting, 9 a.m. Required attendees, Madison Clark. Director of Strategic Operations, Head of Human Resources. Subject, Organizational Optimization. I'd seen enough corporate theater to recognize a firing squad when I saw one. The vague title, the presence of HR, the conspicuous absence of my direct manager. Still, I joined the Zoom call at 8:59, professional as always. The Director of Strategic Operations, a man who'd been with the company all of 6 months and couldn't tell a database from a spreadsheet, cleared his throat. Madison, thank you for joining us. As you know, SynCore is entering a new phase of growth. I watched him fumble through his script, his eyes darting between his notes and the camera. The HR representative sat frozen with that practiced sympathetic expression they must teach in HR school. Neither of them had ever worked directly with me. Neither understood what I actually did. Which requires us to make some difficult decisions about resource allocation and cost optimization. Resource allocation. I almost laughed. I was one person doing the work of an entire department, maintaining legacy systems while simultaneously building new infrastructure. My salary was a rounding error compared to what they'd spent on their latest digital transformation consultant. Effective immediately. We're eliminating your position as part of our restructuring initiative. 9:9. 1:3 a.m. 11 years reduced to a 6-minute scripted performance. Your access will be revoked within the hour. HR chimed in, reading from her checklist. Please ensure all company property is returned by end of day. Your final paycheck will include 2 weeks severance as per company policy. 2 weeks. After 11 years of 60-hour weeks, emergency calls at 3 a.m., and systems that only existed because I'd built them with my own hands. 2 weeks. Any questions? The director asked. Already mentally checked out of this conversation, I had plenty of questions, like whether they knew I was the only one who understood the authentication protocols for our primary dashboard, or if they'd figured out who would handle the daily data reconciliation scripts I'd been running manually because automation budget was not a priority, or if anyone had mentioned that I'd been warning them for months about critical vulnerabilities in the new system they were rushing to deploy. But I just smiled. No questions? I understand. Great. HR will send over the paperwork. We appreciate your contributions to SynCore and wish you the best in your future endeavors. The call ended at 9:09 a.m. I watched as my screen began to change. Email access revoked, Slack channels disappearing one by one, shared drives becoming inaccessible. They were efficient, I'd give them that. Erasing 11 years of dedication in real time. I pulled up my personal notebook, the physical one I'd kept despite their push for complete digitalization. Page after page of handwritten notes, system diagrams, emergency protocols, and most importantly, the warnings I'd documented. Every ignored email, every dismissed concern, every "we'll address that in the next quarter" response to critical issues. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah in development. Just saw the announcement. This is insane. You okay? Announcement. They'd already sent out the team email, probably some sanitized version about me, pursuing new opportunities, or exploring other challenges. The corporate euphemisms for, "We fired the person who knows where all the bodies are buried." I closed my laptop and looked around my home office. 11 years of Syncor memorabilia stared back at me. Awards for system uptime, recognition certificates that meant nothing now, team photos from back when we actually cared about building something meaningful. 9:15 a.m. In 2 minutes, they'd know exactly what they'd just done. But by then, it would already be too late. 3 weeks before my termination, Syncor had made a splashy announcement. Victor Langston, our new chief operating officer, stood before the all-hands meeting with the confidence of someone who'd never actually built anything. Former McKinsey consultant, Stanford MBA, and a LinkedIn profile full of buzzwords like digital transformation catalyst and operational excellence evangelist. "We're not just updating our systems," he'd proclaimed, his designer sneakers squeaking against the conference room floor. "We're revolutionizing how Syncor interfaces with data, agile methodologies, continuous deployment, move fast, and break things." Break things. If only he knew how prophetic those words would be. Victor was the textbook tech bro, 34. Tesla in the executive parking spot. Always talking about disruption while having no idea what he was actually disrupting. He'd walked through our infrastructure once, spent maybe 20 minutes nodding while I explained our architecture, then declared it legacy thinking that's holding us back. The crown jewel of his transformation agenda was the new executive dashboard, a flashy, real-time analytics platform that would aggregate data from all our systems into beautiful, interactive visualizations. The board loved it. The executives couldn't stop talking about it. The marketing team was already preparing case studies. What they didn't love was my 40-page risk assessment documenting exactly why launching it without proper testing would be catastrophic. "Madison, I appreciate your thoroughness," Victor had said, barely glancing at my report. "But we can't let perfect be the enemy of good. We need to be agile, responsive. This isn't the old Syncor anymore." The old Syncor, the one where we tested things before they went live. Where we understood that moving fast with financial data systems wasn't innovation, it was negligence. The authentication protocols alone need at least 6 weeks of testing, I'd insisted. The new dashboard is pulling from 17 different data sources with different refresh rates. If we don't sync them properly, that's exactly the kind of legacy thinking we need to move past, he'd interrupted. Our vendor assured us their platform is enterprise-ready. They've done this for dozens of companies. Our vendor, a startup barely 2 years old, selected because Victor's former McKinsey colleague was on their board. Their enterprise-ready platform had never handled anything close to our data volume or complexity. I'd tried going to our CTO, Grant Milton. Grant had been there 8 years, long enough to know better, but he was also smart enough to know which way the wind was blowing. "Madison, I hear your concerns," he'd said, not looking up from his monitor. "But Victor has the board's full support. Sometimes we need to take calculated risks." Calculated? There was nothing calculated about it. It was Russian roulette with our entire data infrastructure. The final push came during the go-live meeting. I'd prepared a modified deployment plan, a compromise that would at least give us rollback capabilities if things went wrong. "We don't need rollback capabilities," Victor had declared. "That's defeatist thinking. We're going live Monday morning, full deployment, no safety nets. That's how we build confidence in our solutions." Monday morning, the exact morning they'd scheduled my alignment meeting. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were so confident in their vendor's solution that they were firing the only person who understood how our existing systems actually worked. The same systems their shiny new dashboard would depend on for every single byte of data. I'd made one last attempt, pulling Victor aside after the meeting. "At least let me document the manual override procedures," I'd said, "just in case." "Madison," he'd smiled that condescending smile. "I know change is hard, but you need to trust the process. We've got this covered." Covered? Like a tarp thrown over a house of cards in a hurricane. I'd gone back to my desk and updated my notebook, documented every warning, every dismissed concern, every "we've got this covered" reassurance. Then I'd locked away my emergency scripts, the ones I'd written over the years to handle system failures, data corruption, authentication breaks. The ones that weren't part of any official documentation because, officially, we didn't need them. They were about to learn why unofficial solutions were sometimes the only solutions that mattered. Victor's dashboard was set to go live at 9:00 a.m. Monday. My firing was at 9:03 a.m. By 9:17 a.m., they'd understand that moving fast and breaking things was only fun until you actually broke something you couldn't fix. I walked out of my home office and into the kitchen, movements deliberate and calm. 11 years of muscle memory wanted me to immediately start troubleshooting, to open my laptop and fix whatever was about to break. But that wasn't my job anymore. Hadn't been for exactly 14 minutes. My phone sat on the counter, already lighting up with notifications. I ignored it, instead making myself a fresh cup of coffee. The expensive kind I usually saved for weekends. After all, every day was a weekend now. The first personal email arrived at 9:18 a.m. Subject: Urgent System Alert. From System Monitor Syncor, com, forwarded to personal email. Critical: Dashboard API authentication failure. Error cascade detected. 1,247 endpoints affected. I sipped my coffee and smiled. The authentication protocols, the exact ones I'd warned them about. The new dashboard couldn't validate its credentials with our legacy systems because someone had forgotten that our internal APIs used custom headers I'd implemented 5 years ago. A detail conveniently missing from the vendor's comprehensive integration plan. My personal notebook lay open on the kitchen table. Page 73. Dashboard Integration Risks. Every potential failure point meticulously documented in blue ink. Below that, in red, Manual Override Scripts. See Secure Folder SA 2019 Authentication. Those scripts lived on my personal drive now. Backed up, encrypted, and completely legal. I'd written them on my own time, on my own equipment, solving problems that technically didn't exist because acknowledging them would have meant admitting our systems weren't as robust as the executives claimed. Another email. Data flow interruption detected. Customer analytics unavailable. I flipped to page 91. There it was, sketched out 6 months ago when they first announced the dashboard project. The data flow diagram showing exactly where the bottleneck would occur when the new system tried to pull historical data without understanding our custom compression algorithms. My phone rang. Sarah from development. I let it go to voicemail. Then Marcus from database admin. Voicemail. Then a number I didn't recognize but knew was probably from IT support. Voicemail. By 9:25 a.m., I had 17 missed calls and 43 unread messages. The subject lines told the whole story. Dashboard showing blank KPIs, customer data not loading, financial reports all showing 0, help, executive presentation in 30 minutes. I pulled out my personal laptop, the one that had never touched Syncor's network, and opened a simple text file. Consulting rates, 2024. I'd updated it last month, more out of wishful thinking than any real expectation of needing it. Standard Enterprise Consulting. 500-hour emergency response. 1,000-hour critical system recovery. 2,500-hour you fired me and now everything's on fire, surcharge. Priceless. Another notification popped up. This time a forwarded Slack message from someone still on the inside. Grant is losing his mind. Victor keeps saying, the vendor assured us over and over. CEO just asked where Madison is. Where Madison is? Sitting in her kitchen, enjoying excellent coffee, watching 11 years of ignored warnings come home to roost. I opened another notebook, the black one labeled CYA documentation. Every email where I'd raised concerns. Every meeting where I'd been overruled. Every decision made against my explicit recommendations. All printed, dated, and organized chronologically. My lawyer friend had called it admirably paranoid when I'd started keeping it 3 years ago. The phone rang again, This time, a text followed immediately. Madison, it's Grant. Please. We need to talk. We need to talk. Not, we made a mistake. Not, we should have listened. Just, we need. Because that's all I'd ever been to them. A need to be filled. A problem to be solved. A resource to be allocated. I closed the notebook and went to sit in my car. Not to go anywhere, just to watch the building from across the street. The Syncor Tower gleamed in the morning sun. All glass and steel and corporate confidence. From here, you couldn't see the panic. Couldn't see the executives huddled in crisis meetings, the developers frantically Googling error codes, the help desk drowning in tickets. But I knew it was happening. Every system has a heartbeat. And I'd listened to Syncor's for over a decade. Right now, that heartbeat was flatlined. And they'd just realized their only defibrillator walked out the door at 9:16 a.m. with her cardboard box and 11 years of institutional knowledge. My phone buzzed. Another email. This time to my personal consulting address I'd set up months ago. Ms. Clark, we've heard excellent things about your expertise in legacy system integration. It was beginning, inside the Syncor Tower. The 20th floor was in full meltdown mode. I knew this because Sarah finally broke protocol and called from her personal phone. Madison, I'm not supposed to be calling you, but holy shit, you need to know what's happening here. I put her on speaker while I sat in my car, watching employees stream in and out of the building for their coffee breaks, oblivious to the catastrophe unfolding above them. The dashboard went live at 9 sharp, just like Victor wanted. Sarah continued, her voice low. Everything looked fine for about 3 minutes. Beautiful graphics, smooth transitions. Victor actually high-fived the vendor team. And then the numbers started disappearing. First, the Asia-Pacific data, then European markets. By 9:15, the entire dashboard was showing zeros or error messages. Grant called an emergency meeting at 9:20. I could picture it perfectly. The executive conference room with its floor-to-ceiling windows, the 90-inch display showing nothing but empty graphs and error symbols. Victor kept saying the vendor tested everything, Sarah whispered. But here's the best part. Their lead engineer just admitted they only tested with sample data. 50,000 records max. We're pushing 50 million records per hour. 50 million. I'd told them repeatedly that our data volume would overwhelm any system not specifically architected for it. But why listen to the architect when you could trust a PowerPoint presentation? The CEO walked in at 9:30, Sarah continued. Madison, I've never seen him that angry. He asked one question. Why is my dashboard, the one I just showed to the board last week, completely dead? Nobody answered. Another call beeped in. Grant again. I declined it. Then Grant tried to blame the dev team. Said we must have deployed incorrectly. But I pulled up the deployment logs. Everything was exactly as specified. That's when someone mentioned your risk assessment. Ah, yes, my risk assessment. The one Victor had called unnecessarily alarmist in front of the entire leadership team. Victor actually said, and I'm quoting here, her concerns were about edge cases. This is clearly a different issue. Grant just stared at him. I laughed. Edge cases. Like the entire authentication system failing was somehow an unlikely scenario when you ignore custom security protocols. But wait, it gets worse, Sarah said. Remember our biggest client, Meridian Financial? They called. Their automated reports pull from our dashboard API. Since the dashboard is dead, their morning reports showed their entire portfolio valued at $0. Their CEO called our CEO directly. I could hear the yelling from 2 offices away. Meridian Financial, 23% of our revenue. The client I'd personally onboarded 5 years ago, writing custom integrations to ensure their reports never failed. The PM is literally crying, Sarah continued. She keeps refreshing her laptop like that's going to magically fix anything. The vendor team is investigating, but they look completely lost. One of them asked where our system documentation was stored. System documentation. The documentation I'd been building and maintaining alone because hiring technical writers was not a current priority. The documentation that lived in a carefully organized structure only I fully understood. Oh, and compliance just showed up, Sarah added. Apparently, we're supposed to file some regulatory report by noon that pulls data from, guess where? The dashboard, I said. The dashboard, which is currently as useful as a chocolate teapot. Grant's assistant is manually trying to pull numbers from individual databases. She asked me if I knew how to run SQL queries. My phone showed 3 more missed calls from Grant, 2 from unknown numbers, and 1 from a number I recognized as the CEO's direct line. They never called me directly when I worked there. I have to go, Sarah whispered. They're doing another emergency meeting. Madison. They're completely fucked, aren't they? I looked at my dashboard recovery scripts, sitting safely encrypted on my personal drive. That depends entirely on how they handle the next few hours. Are you going to help them? Sarah, I was let go at 9:03 this morning as part of a cost optimization strategy. I'm no longer a Syncor employee. I couldn't help even if I wanted to. That would be inappropriate. She laughed bitterly. Right. Of course. Well, enjoy your freedom. I'm going to go watch Victor explain to legal why we can't produce compliance reports. The call ended 9:40 a.m. 44 minutes since they'd fired me. The dashboard had been dead for 30 minutes. In another hour, they'd start missing SLA commitments. In 2 hours, regulatory fines would begin accumulating, but they'd saved my salary. Victory for cost optimization. By 10:15 a.m., the desperation had reached a new level. My former colleagues were no longer trying to hide their panic. Marcus from database admin texted, Madison, I know you're gone, but please. Do you remember that script you wrote for the APAC data reconciliation, the one with the time zone conversion? I can't find it anywhere. I stared at the message. That script had saved us during the last daylight saving transition when our vendor's system couldn't handle the time zone complexity of our Asian markets. I'd written it at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, tested it myself, and documented its location in 3 different places that apparently no one had ever bothered to check. Delete. Jenny from operations sent an email to my personal address. Hi, Madison. I hope you're doing well. Quick question. Do you happen to have a personal copy of the authentication bypass you created for emergency maintenance? No big deal. Just wondering. The smiley face was a nice touch, as if adding an emoji would make me forget that she'd never once acknowledged my existence in 11 years until she needed something. Delete. Then came the Slack messages, forwarded by those still on the inside. 10:23 a.m. iChannel. Does anyone have Madison's personal contact? Urgent, 10:27 a.m. or dev team. Who else knows how the legacy API authentication works? 10:31 a.m. Emergency response. Client threatening to pull contract. Need dashboard fixed now. 10:35 a.m. Victor Langston. This is unacceptable. Where is our documentation? 10:36 a.m. Grant. Milton. Madison maintained all of that. 10:37 a.m. Victor Langston. Then why don't we have it? 10:38 a.m. Grant Milton. I pulled out my consulting portfolio, the one I'd been building quietly for the past year. Professional website. LLC already registered, insurance in place. I'd learned long ago that hope wasn't a strategy, but preparation was. A LinkedIn notification popped up. 3 recruiters had already viewed my profile. Word traveled fast in our industry. By the time Syncor figured out how to fix their dashboard, every competitor would know their systems were held together by one person who'd just walked out the door. My phone rang. Unknown number with a local area code. I let it go to voicemail, then listened. Ms. Clark, this is David Reeves from Stratagem Insights. We've heard about your sudden availability and would love to discuss an opportunity. We're building a next-generation analytics platform and could use someone with your expertise. The compensation would be significant. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. Stratagem Insights. Syncor's biggest competitor. The timing wasn't coincidental. Someone inside was already talking. Another text from Marcus. They're offering contractors $500 to fix this. Just FYI. $500 an hour. My last raise at Syncor had been 2.3%. They told me budget constraints made anything higher impossible. At 10:45 a.m., something shifted. The messages became less collegial, more desperate. Madison, we need those scripts. This is serious. You have an obligation to help transition your responsibilities. Your NDA includes cooperation during knowledge transfer. People's jobs are at risk because of this situation. Because of this situation, not because they'd fired the person maintaining critical infrastructure, not because they'd ignored countless warnings. The situation just happened. Apparently. Like weather. I opened my notebook to the section labeled Intellectual Property. Every script, every system, every piece of documentation I'd created on company time was meticulously logged. What belonged to Syncor? What I'd created independently? What lived in the gray area of maintenance scripts written at home because the company wouldn't allocate time for proper development? The recovery scripts they needed, written on my personal laptop, on weekends, using my own resources because Victor had declared maintenance automation a low priority. The documentation they were scrambling to find, stored exactly where I told them in 17 different emails, in a system they'd decided to decommission without migrating the contents. Another LinkedIn notification. This time from a former Syncor executive who'd left 2 years ago. Madison, heard about this morning. I told them this would happen. If you're interested, I'm CTO at a startup that actually values infrastructure. Let's talk. 11 a.m. The dashboard had been dead for 2 hours. In the financial services world, that wasn't a glitch, it was a catastrophe. Every minute of downtime was thousands in lost revenue, credibility hemorrhaging with each error message. My phone rang again. This time, I recognized the number. Richard Steinberg, Syncor's chief legal officer. The only C-suite executive who'd ever bothered to understand what I actually did. I almost answered. Almost. But then I remembered his signature on the email approving my termination. Just another Madison Clark to be optimized away. By 11:15 a.m., I'd received 3 consulting inquiries, 2 job offers, and 17 increasingly frantic messages from Syncor. The morning was still young. At 11:45 a.m., Richard Steinberg called again. This time, I answered. Madison, thank you for picking up. His voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the strain. We need to discuss the current situation. What situation would that be, Richard? I kept my tone neutral, professional. I'm no longer a Syncor employee as of 9:03 this morning. Yes, about that. We've discovered some complications with your termination. It seems there are certain contractual obligations that weren't properly reviewed. I smiled. They'd found it, buried in my original employment contract from 11 years ago. Updated but never fully revised. Was a clause I'd insisted on when they'd first hired me. Any system-critical infrastructure I developed required my written approval for major modifications or migrations. It was standard protection for architects in 2013. Everyone had forgotten about it. I see, I said. And it appears the dashboard deployment may have violated those terms. Our compliance team is quite concerned. Compliance. The magic word that made executives pay attention. Not the technical warnings, not the risk assessments, but the possibility of regulatory violations. Additionally, Richard continued, we've been informed that several of our authentication certificates are set to expire at midnight tonight. The renewal process apparently requires specialized knowledge. The certificates. I'd been managing those renewals for 5 years, a complex process involving multiple vendors and custom configurations. The documentation existed, but it was like giving someone a recipe written in ancient Sumerian. That sounds challenging, I offered. Madison, I'll be direct. We need your help. The CEO and CTO are prepared to discuss a consulting arrangement. I'm listening, We're offering a 6-month contract at market rates. You'd help stabilize the current situation and document critical processes. Market rates. They still didn't get it. Richard, I appreciate the offer, but I don't think you understand the scope of what you're asking. You've got a dead dashboard affecting million-dollar clients, expiring certificates that will lock out your entire user base, and a compliance audit that you can't complete without systems I built. This isn't a consulting gig. It's a rescue mission. Silence on the other end. Then, what would you propose? I pulled out my prepared terms, the ones I drafted while watching their building from my car. 6-month contract. Minimum. $2,500 per hour for emergency response, $1,500 for standard hours, 50% premium for weekend work. Payment terms. Net 15. With a $100,000 retainer due immediately. Full autonomy over technical decisions related to system recovery. And Victor Langston doesn't get to override my recommendations. That's substantially above market rates. No, Richard. Market rates are what you pay when the market has options. Right now, I'm not the market. I'm the only person who can fix this before your stock price opens tomorrow and investors realize your entire data infrastructure is held together with digital duct tape. I heard muffled voices in the background. Richard hadn't muted properly. I could hear Grant saying, "Just agree to whatever she wants," and Victor protesting about setting precedents. "There's one more thing," I added. I wanted in writing that any system I touch during this contract gets properly documented and transitioned. With a dedicated team, not just whoever has time. I won't leave you in this position again, but I also won't enable the negligence that created it. More muffled discussion. Then Richard returned. "Can you start immediately?" "I can start once the retainer clears and I have a signed contract. My lawyer's email is McClark Consulting, Legal Law Firm. Com. Have your legal team send the agreement there." Madison. What you need is to follow proper procedures. Isn't that what this morning's meeting was about? Organizational optimization? Well, this is optimized. I'm running a business, not a charity for companies that fire critical personnel without succession planning. Yo, the CEO wants to speak with you directly. The CEO can speak to me once I'm officially retained. Until then, every minute we spend talking is another minute your dashboard stays dark. Oh. And Richard? The certificate renewal process starts at 2 p.m. if you want any chance of completing it before midnight. That gives you 2 hours to get the paperwork sorted. I hung up. 11:58 a.m. 3 hours since they'd optimized me out of their organization. 3 hours to learn that some people aren't resources to be allocated. They're the foundation everything else is built on. My phone immediately started ringing again. This time, the CEO's personal line. I let it ring. They could wait their turn in the queue, just like every urgent request I'd handled for 11 years. The real negotiation was about to begin. At 1:47 p.m., the retainer hit my account. $100,000. The contract followed 3 minutes later. Every clause I'd demanded included. Even the one about Victor's authority. They'd caved completely. I opened my laptop, my real laptop, the one with full access to my archived scripts and documentation. Time to show them what actual expertise looked like. First, I logged into the emergency conference bridge. The panic was palpable. "Madison, thank God," Grant's voice cracked. "The certificates? I need everyone except core technical staff off this call." I interrupted. "Grant, Sarah, Marcus, and the vendor's lead engineer, everyone else, out." "Now wait a minute," Victor started. "Victor, check section 3.2 of my contract. Full autonomy over technical decisions. You're welcome to stay if you can tell me the difference between SSL and TLS certificates." Silence. Then the satisfying sound of people dropping off the call. "Good. Sarah, share your screen. Navigate to the certificate management portal." For the next 40 minutes, I walked them through the certificate renewal process. Not the quick fix they wanted, the proper way. Every step documented, every command explained, every decision point clarified. "Madison, the vendor's engineer interrupted. Couldn't we just? No. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. Your shortcuts are why we're here. By 2:30 p.m., the certificates were renewed. Crisis 1 averted. Time for the main event. Now, the dashboard, I said, pulling up my recovery scripts. Marcus, you're going to run exactly what I tell you. No modifications, no improvements, exactly as written. I fed them the scripts line by line. Authentication bridges to handle the custom headers. Data flow controllers to manage the volume. Timeout adjustments for the Asia-Pacific latency. Everything I'd built over the years to keep SynCore running smoothly. 3:15 p.m. First data point appeared on the dashboard. 3:27 p.m. European markets came online. 3:41 p.m. Full historical data restored. 3:56 p.m. All KPIs showing correctly. It's working. Grant breathed. Everything's working. Of course it's working, I said. It's the same solution I proposed 6 months ago, the one Victor called unnecessarily complex. The CEO joined the call. Madison, save it, James. You've got a functional dashboard and valid certificates. Meridian Financial should see corrected reports within the hour. Your compliance filing can proceed as scheduled. The immediate crisis is over. Thank you. I know this morning was a predictable consequence of systematic negligence, but that's a conversation for another day. Right now, you need to decide something more important. What's that? Whether you want me to implement permanent fixes over the next 6 months, or whether you want to be right back here the next time someone decides to optimize away critical knowledge. Silence. Then, what do you recommend? 3-person infrastructure team, reporting directly to the CTO, proper documentation standards, monthly architecture reviews, and no deployments without testing. Real testing, not vendor promises. That sounds expensive, I laughed. James, you just paid me more in 3 hours than you saved by firing me for an entire year. Maybe it's time to reconsider what expensive means. More silence. In the background, I could hear phones ringing, probably clients calling to confirm their systems were working again. Agreed, James finally said. Can you start building that team tomorrow? I can start Monday. Tomorrow's Saturday, and according to my contract, weekends are 50% premium. Unless you want to pay emergency rates for non-emergency work? Monday's fine. Madison, why did you help us? You could have let us burn. I closed my laptop and looked out my window at the SynCore tower. Because I'm a professional, James. And professionals don't let personal feelings compromise system integrity. But make no mistake, this was business, not forgiveness. You fired me at 9:03 a.m. By 9:17, you were begging me to come back. Maybe next time, you'll think twice before optimizing away the people who actually keep your company running. The call ended at 4:17 p.m., 7 hours and 14 minutes after they'd terminated me. In that time, I'd earned more than 6 months of my previous salary and proven a point that no MBA program would ever teach. Some people aren't costs to be cut. They're the pillars holding up your entire house of cards. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good stuff, not the Friday night special, and toasted the SynCore tower. Tomorrow, recruiters would be calling, competitors would be circling, and somewhere in that glass building, executives would be learning the hardest lesson in business. The difference between price and value is usually discovered at the worst possible moment. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. You're my hero. Also, Victor just quit. I smiled. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't destroying those who wronged you. It's letting them see exactly what they threw away, then charging them premium rates to get it back. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate karma, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about workplace justice. Have you ever witnessed a similar situation where someone's true value was only recognized after they left? Let me know in the comments.